rumor in our family that my oldest son, Mark, who's now 21, may have actually been conceived at the White Inn. I wasn't there, but no. But I know that because when my wife Mary, when it was our first baby, she had the first sonogram, and she gets a picture, the Polaroid picture of the sonogram, and she was calling the baby Whitey. And I said, Whitey, where do you get Whitey from? And she said, White Inn, remember? But it is a beautiful place. It's a beautiful day, great day to drive down here today from where I live now in Orchard Park. And as you know, it's been rough down here too. I know it's been a rough winter in Buffalo and Western New York with a lot of snow and a lot of cold, and it's been tough. And I think we finally, a day like today makes you think that maybe we've seen the end of it. I don't have a problem driving. Would have come down here anyway, regardless of the weather. My wife has a problem driving in the snow though, and we've kind of talked it through a couple times. She just doesn't like driving in the bad weather. And a couple of weeks ago, we had a bad snowstorm in Orchard Park, and she was looking for, suggestions. I said, look, Mary, here's what you do. Whenever it's really bad out and it's snowing and you can't see, just follow the snowplow. Just follow the snowplow. That'll eventually get you home. So she tried it, and one night, a couple weeks ago, really bad storm, and she's following the snowplow, doing what I told her, and she's driving around, following the snowplow for about an hour and a half. All of a sudden, the snowplow stops, and the driver comes back and says, excuse me, I noticed you've been following me. And my wife said, yeah, my husband told me that if I'm ever, stuck in the snowstorm, just follow the plow. He said, okay, that's good advice. He said, well, listen, I'm done here in the Wegmans lot. I'm going across the street to My wife's not here, right? I do want to say, and handing the plaques to Coach Sirianni, I had a flashback to a time that I spent in Chautauqua here. Just this past summer, I was honored really to have the privilege to interview Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner at the institution back, I think it was late June 28th. And it was kind of an interesting thing that happened. Jim Roselli and I were talking about it today because Jay had his football team there that day to meet the commissioner, but they were also, I believe, Coach, on your way to work, you're doing your volunteer work for the Alzheimer's patients that you did all summer long. And I got talking to some of those kids, and I think I said hello to the coach, and they were introduced to Roger Goodell, and he told them about this summer project they had to work with Alzheimer's patients. And I kind of made a mental note. There's a special team there at Southwestern. There's a special thing going on there, and I'm glad to see that it paid off with the state championship. Congratulations to you and your group. It's an honor to be here because of the tremendous class that you have here for the Hall of Fame this year. Really, it's an amazing, group that you have here. A race walker who made it through the Olympic trials, a 3-sport star at Faulkner High School, a pioneer, a car owner in NASCAR, one of the all-time greats in Fredonia basketball, Michael Heary, and of course, an Olympic silver medalist. I mean, that's pretty special company to be in, and I'm really honored to be part of the evening tonight, sort of move the program along. I do have a relationship with the Hearys and Michael Heary, who sits right down here from Fredonia, and I'll tell you a quick story. This is absolutely true. Michael Heary was on my radar screen when I was working in Buffalo as a basketball star at Fredonia High School, a really good basketball player at Fredonia High School. One of my good friends, I went to high school with a guy who's now a basketball coach at Michigan, University of Michigan, John Beeline. At the time, early 90s, John Beeline was the head coach at Canisius College. John had an aspiring young assistant named Mike McDonald, and John said to Mike McDonald, there's a pretty good player down in Fredonia. I want you to recruit him. I want this kid to go to Canisius. His name is Michael Heary. So John sent Mike down, and Mike came down and watched Michael Heary play, and came back down and watched him play again, and watched him play 2 or 3 or 4 times. And as it turned out, Michael Heary went to the Naval Academy, and the assistant coach, Mike McDonald, married Michael Heary's sister. So, to this day, it's a true story. Coach Beeline is still upset to this day. Nothing against you, Maura, but I think Coach Beeline thought he could have done better with Michael. Maura is here. She's a good friend of mine. Her husband, Mike, is an outstanding basketball coach at Medaille College in Buffalo. Maura, can you stand up? Because I think Michael probably... Coach Beeline thinks he got the short end of that deal. I don't know.
So here we are. We're going to talk to John Murphy, superstar. 21 years involved with the Buffalo Bills, but the most important thing we want to talk about is your role as Bruce Almighty. How did that happen?
My first movie. Yeah, I'm still waiting for the other offers to come in, the other scripts.
Give me the background of that.
I'm trying to think. It had to be the summer of 2002 because I think the movie came out in 2003. I got a call from the promotions director at Channel 7, and I knew the movie was, there was talk that the movie was out there. There was going to be a Jim Carrey movie that dealt with Channel 7. And he said the producer wants a small snippet of a sportscast. He said, and I was actually working in Rochester at Bill's camp. It had to be August of '02, and he said, can you come back to the studio tonight? And I said, okay. So I drove back and sat down in the studio. They had one line to read. It was, well, the Sabres lost again last night, and that was it. And we did it 3 or 4 different ways. They recorded it on videotape and sent it out west to the producers. So I never really got involved in the shooting of the movie. I never met Jim Carrey or Jennifer Aniston, even though I tried to meet her. The funny thing was, that was the only piece of video that the producer requested. But all my coworkers at Channel 7, Keith Radford, Susan Banks, Mike Randall in particular, said, well, we'll do video snips too. So they all recorded little snippets of video and put it on the same tape. And the only one they used was me, for whatever reason. I don't know why they only used me, but they were upset. The others were upset that they didn't get used. I don't know why they used me, because later in the movie there is a sportscaster. You know, they had a actor playing a sportscaster, but I don't know if it added authenticity to it or not. But it was great, and the best part about it was it was a pretty big movie in 2003. I think it was the second or third highest grossing film of '03. Well, I'll take some credit for that. But but the best part was friends of mine and people I hadn't seen in years, college friends, high school friends, old girlfriends from wherever, they all had a similar experience that I would hear about later. They'd be sitting in the movie not knowing that I was going to be there, and in the middle of the movie they would jump up or shout out, "Hey, I know that guy!" And everybody in the movie would say, "Shh, shh, shh." I mean, I probably heard that from a dozen different people from all over the country. They were all like, "Hey, I know John Murphy," you know, and everybody's like, "Shut up, shut up." So that was the best part, to hear from people that I haven't heard from in years.
Probably giving you as much exposure as anything you've done.
It's a great little story. Yeah, it was a good movie. Again, I'm still waiting for more scripts to come in. I'm open. You know, my calendar is open. I'm ready to work with Jim. I can't believe, you know, I don't know if you noticed that the sequel, Evan Almighty, was not quite as successful as Bruce Almighty. So, and I was missing from the sequel. So maybe there's something to be said.
James Bond film.
Yeah, I can do James Bond. Yeah, sure.
What's your favorite sport? I mean, you've done basketball, you did Canisius, you've done baseball, and obviously tremendous success in football.
Yeah. I mean, my favorite sport, as far as watching and enjoying, is probably baseball, just because I like the, I like the pace of it, and I like the, the game inside the game. I have to confess, I'm really down on Major League Baseball these days because of everything that's gone on, including the steroid scandals. And I just had a conversation, my brothers and I try to go with each other and with our children, our male children, to a different baseball park every summer. Pittsburgh, we've been to Detroit, New York, Washington, just, you know, a drivable trip. And we talked about it yesterday. A couple of us were getting together, and I said I might protest this year because of the steroid scandal. I'm just sick of subsidizing Major League Baseball. But I do love the game, and I like minor league baseball. Bisons. Actually went to a Jamestown. I don't think they were the Jammers then. They might have been. On my honeymoon, I went to Chautauqua here and dragged my new bride to a Jamestown New York Penn League game that she still reminds me of. Were they the Jammers back then in the 80s? I don't think they were.
No. They were the Expos.
Yeah, the Expos, the Jamestown Expos. Yeah, we had a great time. I used to drag her to, actually, when we were dating, my wife and I, we would go to Bison games at Old Moore Memorial Stadium and get in for like $3 or $5 and spend $1.50 for beers. And the best thing, and I love baseball because you can sit there and talk during the game and converse, and you can actually, convince someone to marry you at a baseball game if you're persuasive enough. That said,
did you do that?
No, but I'm sure all that time had something to do with it. But I mean, I love football. I love the NFL, the spectacle of the NFL. There's nothing like game day in the NFL. I mean, there's nothing, the intensity of the game and the anticipation, the build-up for a week. There's nothing like it in sports. Really, I don't think anything in American culture like the anticipation of an NFL weekend and a big game atmosphere. And that, I find myself drawn to that increasingly over the years. I've always have been a fan of the Bills and the NFL, but I think it is right now the greatest sport. NFL football, the greatest sport in America.
Did you go to Syracuse because of wanting to get into announcing?
Yeah, I did.
Did you go to Maxwell?
Actually, Newhouse School.
No,
it was the journalism. Yeah. I applied to a number of schools and got into Syracuse, and I went. I graduated with a degree in broadcast journalism. Actually, I went to law school for a year. When I graduated, I have an older brother who was a lawyer who convinced me to take the LSAT in my senior year, and I did pretty well, and got some scholarship assistance to go to University of Buffalo Law School. So not being able to get a job right away, I said, okay, I'll go to law school. Went to UB Law School, hated it, and got a part-time job in radio because that's really what I liked and what I knew best. But yeah, I went to Syracuse to study journalism.
Stan Barron, was he one of
Yeah.
your heroes there?
Absolutely, yeah. When I started at WBEN, I started as the night newscaster, and Stan was did the sports show, Freeform Sports, every weeknight, and so I'm trying to think of the time. It was mid '80s. Well, Stan died in '84, so it was early '80s. So I had to be 25, 26, 27 at the time, maybe a little younger, 25, 26, and just do a newscast, which was fine and fun, and it was challenging, but there was nothing like having Stan come in at 3 in the afternoon. We worked the same shift, 3 to 11, and he would bounce. He had to write a sports commentary every day, 1-minute sports commentary that aired on the noon show. And there was no greater compliment than having Stan Barron say, John, what should I write about today? Or, hey, John, what do you think of this? And to be able to feed him ideas and have him bounce ideas off me, I thought that this is great. This is like a legend who's looking to me for ideas and looking to me for not guidance, but just for, a fresh approach to things. So, yeah, I love working with Stan. I learned an awful lot from Stan.
During that time, there were other folks who we refer to as legends, the Ralph Hubbles,
Mm-hmm.
the Chuck Reifenberg. Were they part of Chuck Healy, yeah?
Yeah.
Were they part of your world?
Growing up, absolutely. Especially, I later met Dick Reifenberg and got to know him a little bit. And never met Chuck Healy, but grew up watching him. I met Ralph Hubble, during that, around then 80s. I can't remember when Ralph passed away. I want to say early 90s. But actually did interviews with him, talked to him several times. Yeah, they were, it was sort of, Rick Azar, grew up watching Rick Azar. So I, growing up in Buffalo as a sports fan in Buffalo, I grew up watching these people, Van Miller obviously, and being able to work with some of them at the end. It was pretty unique.
What was your introduction to the Bills? How did that work? Were you actually, was Stan Barron a part of that?
Yeah, it was, unfortunately. It started in the 80s. I want to say 82 might have been the first year. The Bills were getting bigger and bigger. They wanted to do a radio show at WBEN. I was doing news there full-time, and they wanted to do a radio show. Stan would do the Monday Night Coaches show with, it would have been Chuck Knox at the time. And I think they wanted to expand things, so they asked me to host a show with Fred Smirlis and Jim Haslett that immediately followed the Coaches show. Could not have been any more different than, the Coaches show. Stan and Chuck Knox played it pretty straight. Chuck Knox was very good guy, but very authoritarian and gruff. And then at 8 o'clock on a Monday night, it would be Smirlis, Haslett, and me. I was like the, trying to keep those two together. They were nuts, basically. And they were crazy on Monday nights because they had Tuesdays off. So they would come in with 6 packs of beer, and you could hear in the background, cans of beer opening, which is a definite FCC violation. But so that was kind of my introduction, and we did. And then they got me going on pregame features for the Bills broadcast. Again, everything was getting bigger. The NFL wasn't as big then as it is now, but back then they had maybe a half-hour pregame. They wanted to expand it to an hour and a half, so they had me do pregame interviews and pregame features. And then they brought me in to do halftime interviews on the home games. And then, unfortunately, in 1984, I was all poised to do that again. And in preseason of '84, Stan got sick. He had been suffering from cancer. I think he was in the early stages. And at a preseason game in 1984 in Indianapolis, he really had a tough go, and they needed to find somebody to plug in the next week. The season started the next week. So I was, just an innocent bystander, and they threw me in there. It worked out pretty well. But it was, it was a tough time because Stan was sick. He died about 2.5 months later in mid-November. And I was just thrown in there, and never had, I'd done high school football at smaller radio stations in Lockport. Obviously, I'd never done NFL games, but, Van sort of took me by the hand and brought me along.
That first game, and they finally mic you up, and you're the color guy, and Van's flipping it over to you. What was your chemistry like?
Yeah, well, Van was great. Van, basically took me by the hand, and I think, trying to remember, it wasn't the second game we were on the road at St. Louis, the St. Louis Cardinals, and Van sort of hazed me. I guess it was a rookie hazing. He put road rookie on my hotel room door and on the door to the press box. So I think by teasing me, Van sort of brought me along and let me know that it was going to be okay. And he was very encouraging. And I was just trying not to screw up at the time in 1984 when I first got started. Van was basically, the load was on Van to get the broadcast right. I was just learning. It was on the job training.
Did you suspect that was going to be 1 year of one, or did you, when they got you on board, hoping, no, obviously hoping against hope that you'd be in for the long haul, but you're on trial. I mean, you're.
Yeah, I didn't. I wanted to. When they threw me in there, I thought I'm going to get us through the season. And I thought they'd go out and find somebody, and I guess it went pretty well. At the end of the year, the owner of WBEN, a guy named Larry Levitt, who was a great guy, said, "I'm going to do you a favor." He said, "I'm going to send you and your wife to the Super Bowl in San Francisco," because they didn't pay me any extra. I mean, there was no thing. It was basically, can you help us out and do the color on these games? And I said, sure. By the end of the year, I realized that I liked it a lot, even though the Bills were 2-14. They weren't winning much, but I liked it a lot, and I guess got better as it went along. And Larry said, and when you come back from San Francisco with your no, Mary wasn't even my wife then, so strike that. But she went to San Francisco with me. But he said, when you come back, I want to talk to you about next year and doing the Bills games. And I guess I was kind of shocked. I never thought about '85, but when I came back, he said, we want you to do the games again next year with Van. So
We were also doing Bisons. See, this would have been the Bisons would have been '88.
Yeah, I started doing Bison baseball in '85. Was, I believe, the first year of AAA affiliation,
Okay.
and they got hooked up with the Chicago White Sox in '85. So I did 4 years of Bisons: '85, '86, '87 in Old War Memorial Stadium, and then '88 at the new place, Pilot Field at the time. So I did 4 years of Bison baseball. Pete Weber was the lead announcer. I did home games only. Pete did home and away. I did home games, did color, and like 3 or 4 innings of play-by-play every home game.
So at some point, you actually get yourself into the television world with replacing a legend up there, Rick Azar.
Yeah.
How'd that work?
Yeah. How did that work? This is ancient history. Now, this is 21 years ago. We were going, my wife was working at Channel 7 at the time. The Bills had a playoff game in Cincinnati. I guess it must have been the AFC Championship game in January of '89. And Rick was with us for some reason. We were doing the Bills game. We were riding on a bus from the Cincinnati airport to the hotel. I guess he used to ride with us once in a while. And he told me, he said, hey, I'm thinking I'm going to get out in about 6 months or so. And he said, I'm going to tell them they should hire you. And I said, okay. But who knows, And then 6 months later, I think it was June or July, he got out, and I applied for it. And I started there. I still working at BN Radio. So I worked there and just came in and did the 6. I'd work there from 2:30 to 6:30 and then shoot over to BEN and work from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. So that's how I started at Channel
Were they
7.
under separate ownership at the time?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, how did that work? I mean, what happened in the world of exclusivity?
Yeah, I don't know why. Everybody was cutting me breaks. I was extremely grateful. The people at radio, I guess I was under contract, and they said, well, we still want you to do the radio show. I had a very good producer, John DeMurl, who would set up the shows, and we would talk during the course of the day, but he would set up the radio shows. But they had to, bend. They said, yeah, you can come in at 5 to 7. And the TV people, the same thing. I said, I'd like to do this, but I still have this radio commitment. And they said, well, let's just do the 6. And that went on for '89, '90, and '91, and then I started full-time at Channel 7 in the spring of '92, I believe.
Irv Weinstein, we've heard so much about him. Was there any sort of awe factor of just working with Irv, or he was such one of the guys?
Yeah, I guess, was I in awe of him? I mean, I'd known him because my wife had worked there for a year or two before I started there, so I'd known him. I'd watched him my entire life. I wasn't in awe of him. I mean, he's a little short guy, there's nothing really to be in awe of. I respected him and respected his career and what he had done. I was not in awe of him, Irv was quirky. So once you got around his quirks, you saw that he was just pretty much a regular guy.
What were some of his quirks?
Well, I mean, he, I don't want to besmirch his reputation, but he had sort of a foul mouth, and it took me a while to get used to that. To hear Irv bellowing, swear words across the news, and the first few times you hear that, it gets your attention, Not directed at anyone, just sort of, that's the way it was. It was sort of and it's changed there now, but it was sort of a rollicking place, that newsroom. There was opinions being exchanged in a very loud and sometimes abrasive manner. There were arguments on a regular basis, not with Irv, but it was a good place to work. It was a good place to learn TV because people cared about it deeply. And there were a lot of people there trying to do a good job.
And the weather guy was still there, right?
Tom Jones, yeah. And to be honest with you, I learned more from Tom, I guess, than Irv. And nothing against Irv, but I just like Tom's approach. Tom sort of floated above everything and stayed away from the fray. He didn't get he didn't get mixed up in the office politics or, trying to intimidate people. Tom was, and I really, in many ways, I still do try to pattern myself over the way Tom Jones handled things.
Do you have as many coats as he had?
No, he's got an amazing array of outer garments.
Right.
Yeah, he really does. He probably still does.
He always did. Yeah.
Tom, I see Tom once in a while. He's in Orchard Park, and we bump into each other.
Flipping me a little, I'm just visualizing, flipping from TV to radio, your head's a little bit different. You're at a sportscast, and it's got to be written and tight, and it's right there for the 4 or 5 minutes that you have. Talk about the difference in that.
Yeah, I wish it were 4 or 5 minutes. It's more like 3 or 4, It was, I love the freedom of radio. I always felt like in radio you could kind of let yourself stretch out a little bit, and you could obviously have a dialogue with people by a telephone. You could do long-form interviews on radio that you couldn't do on TV. I understand that TV is more immediate. Obviously, it's more impactful, more people watch. And I guess I approach the TV work as more it is a newscast about sports that we're doing. It's in many ways a headline service because you have such limited time. So you got to get you get the information out there and do it succinctly and quickly and move on. Whereas in radio you have time to maybe develop ideas a little bit more. So I like the ability to do both.
Bills, obviously there are 21 years. You've seen just about everything, and I'm sure the question you get often asked is, are there 4 or 5 highlight moments, whether they're on the air, off the air, vignettes that are things that you talk about or maybe talk about tonight?
Yeah, it's hard to boil them down. Well, I talked about Mann's hazing me as sort of the road rookie early on. There were obviously games coming to mind. The playoff game in Cleveland at the end of the '89 season, the Bills lost actually, but it was just an amazing finish. Ronnie Harmon dropped a pass in the end zone, and then Kelly was intercepted by Clay Matthews to basically end the Bills' chances. And it ended kind of a bumpy season for the Bills, but you could tell they were on the cusp of being a really good team. And that they almost couldn't get out of their way in many ways that season, and that game sort of symbolized it. That was also the game that I think was the birth of the no-huddle offense, the K-gun offense. So that was probably one of my most memorable games. Plus the whole setting in Cleveland, on the roof of Cleveland Stadium where the radio booth was, and you can look out over the lake, and it was like first week in January, I think it was January 3rd, and the lake was iced over. And I like a lot of the settings for NFL games, and one of my favorite for years, and it's not anymore, they've ruined it, was Soldier Field in Chicago, and we don't get there very often. But we had done some preseason games there and a couple of regular season games, and if you've never been there, it's right on the lakeshore.
Right.
It's right there on the lakeshore, and they're on a summer night with sailboats on the lake and the sun, setting behind you. It's just a beautiful spot to do a game, and even in the fall, it's a beautiful spot. Now they've ruined it. It looks nothing like it did before they put a stadium inside the shell of Soldier Field, and the radio booth is way down low, and it's just not a good place to work anymore. And it doesn't look anything like the old Soldier Field. I'm thinking of memorable moments. We had a lot of, we did a game in Cincinnati once. We employ spotters, and we bring them our own spotters now, but we used to employ, for $50 a game, a spotter whose job would be to help the play-by-play guy identify names and numbers. And in Cincinnati was notorious for being the cheapest NFL organization. They probably still are. And the public relations department was always a little bit shaky. So the Cincinnati PR guy, I forget his name, Van could tell you, assigned the spotter to our broadcast. The guy came in with sunglasses on, wraparound sunglasses, an older gentleman, and Van said to him, are you going to be okay? And he goes, oh, yeah, I had surgery the other day, but I'm okay. And Van was a little, worried. And game begins, and the guy had no idea what he was doing, just no idea. He couldn't identify, he was no help at all to Van, just couldn't identify the players. And we get to the first commercial break, and Van said, are you okay? What happened with your surgery? Well, the guy took off his sunglasses, and he had a patch on one eye. We had a one-eyed spotter. He had surgery. And the guy said, yeah, I thought I was okay, but I've got this good eye. I'm kind of seeing double. Oh. And Van said, well, just divide the number by 2 and point to somebody. Yeah. It was classic Van Miller. We laughed about that. We still laugh about the one-eyed spotter in Cincinnati. We had we had an incident a couple of years ago, and Van was off the broadcast. I was doing play-by-play. I think I was working with Alex Van Pelt as a color man. And at the time, I would do a pregame show. I would help with the pregame show in the Bills Fieldhouse, which is adjacent to the parking lot there. And we'd finish up there and really have to hustle to get into the booth. I had like 10 minutes to go from Fieldhouse to go to the men's room and get in the booth. I mean, it was tough. You had to run. So you're kind of running across the parking lot. It was me, my son Mark, who was spotting for us at the time, and my friend Mike Mullane, who also was a spotter for home games. And we were crossing across the parking lot, and they had guardrails, metal guardrails. And I'm sort of, jumping over this guardrail, and I accidentally got the inseam of my pants hooked on the bolt on the guardrail and ripped the inseam from basically the crotch all the way down to the ankle. My pants are flying in the breeze. Now it's a half hour before kickoff. So they're laughing, and we, put some electrical tape on it, and it looks stupid, and they were making fun of me, Van Pelt, everybody. So I decided, well, I only live 5 minutes away. So I called my wife, Mary, who had just come home from Mass, 12 o'clock Mass. It's like 1 o'clock. I mean, kickoff is in a minute or two. And I said, Mary, you got to help me out. I need a pair of pants. She goes, what? I said, you got to bring me a pair of pants. There's a pair of khakis in the closet. You got to bring them. She said, what happened? I said, I ripped my pants. She said, you what, your pants? I said, I ripped my pants. I ripped my pants, cell phone. So she shows up without a press pass or any ticket at the outer gate of the stadium and, with a pair of pants, and the police recognize her. And they said, see, what's going on, Mary? Well, my husband John needs this pair of pants. I said, oh, come on. So apparently she jumped on the back of the motorcycle with the pants on a hanger, and the mounted, motorcycle police officer drove her up to the press box door, and she walked in, and like first or second commercial break in the first quarter, she's standing in the back of the press box with my pants. It was pretty funny. I still hear about that a lot too.
Did you, when you became play-by-play, and you've had a couple of color folks, do you work with them ahead of time? Do you have a real say as to who's going to be selected?
Yeah, we talk about it a lot. It's not my say, but when I started, the first order of business was to find a color man, and Alex Van Pelt was just coming off the field, and I knew Alex from his playing days and knew how smart he is. He's a quarterback coach now for the team, so I knew he'd be good. And we did actually do a couple of practice games, but he was good right out of the box. He was ready to go. And we do a practice game. We get a videotape of a game from the season before, and watch the videotape. And sometimes we do it just in a room. Lately, we've taken to doing them in the stadium, putting them on the monitors, on the TV monitors, and kind of replicate the whole process. We had Alex for 2 years and Mark Kelso the last 3 years, and Kelso is such a stickler for preparation. The first year, we did 3 practice games. Last year, we got him down to 1, but I know that this summer he'll send me an email in June and say, let's set a date for a practice game. So sometime in July, we'll get a game on tape from last year. We'll get the rosters. We'll have our producer, Doug Wolf. I don't know if I won't need a spotter, but we'll get 4 or 5 people together, and we'll go in the stadium and play the game, through the TVs and practice doing a game. And Mark is great like that. Mark forces everybody to kind of ratchet up their preparation level, and he feels better about doing a practice game in July, so I'm sure we'll do that again.
Give me a standard week for you. Talk about preparation. Game ends on Sunday.
Yeah.
Monday, you're going to be in St. Louis to see a game. What does John Murphy do?
Well, I have this other job, the CV job, too, which, is good and bad. There's time spent there, but a lot of it is time spent covering the Bills, so that sort of, cuts both ways. But as far as preparation for the radio, usually on Monday night, I will download rosters from the Bills' upcoming opponents. Well, first of all, sometime on Monday, I watch the Bills game from the previous day, spend time, watching it pretty closely, and if I can, I usually don't have the tapes of our game by then. But I watch the game just to see what I missed, basically, or see what maybe the network people said. Monday night, I'll download the rosters from the Bills' opponents. On Tuesdays, I usually take off TV work on Tuesdays, and at some point Tuesday night, make up the spotting chart for the Bills' opponents, which is an hour and a half, 2 hour process. Names, numbers, positions, just so you can kind of.
So you literally will have
a board, yeah. It's like a 14 by 11 piece of cardboard with offense on one side, defense on the other, and you just put names and numbers each position. So I'll do that on Tuesdays. On Wednesdays, I usually go to the stadium, around noon and do TV interviews, but also, talk to people about the game. And so you're kind of preparing for radio. On Wednesday night, by Wednesday night, I usually watch video of the Bills' opponents with my spotting chart so I can see who plays, when.
Does the NFL give you that?
No, I've been asking PR guys in the league if they can do that, and they don't. So I just tape it at home.
Okay.
I usually have tapes of games most Bills opponents. Early in the season, it's not as easy, but by the end of the year, I've got 3 or 4 games on almost everybody, And I watch as much as I can with my spotting chart. So it gives you an idea who's playing on third downs and who's playing well and, who lines up on the right side, left side as far as receivers and how do they use people. And do that every night, for the rest of the week. On Fridays, usually the Bills practice at 10:30 or so. Fridays, they let myself and Mark Kelso watch practice, which helps to see kind of who's healthy. You can't really tell what the game plan is, but you can see what things they're focusing on. Kelso,
Do you have any sort of embargo on Friday?
yeah, I can't use any of that stuff before it's Sunday. I can't use it on TV. Yeah, which is fine. I mean, they let us in there because we're doing the game on the radio. So Fridays are big. We watch practice. Mark comes in at like 6 or 7 on Fridays. He watches coach's video. He has access to that. And then he comes out, we watch practice. And then we sit down on Friday for an hour and a half from noon till 1:30 and kind of talk about issues in the upcoming game and themes. And then Saturday, if it's a road game, we travel to the game site and then do the game on Sunday. So
Do you fly out with the...
yeah, the charter, yeah.
Do they give you restrictions as to access to the players?
Yeah, I mean, basically whatever media access we get, and the Bills open the locker room every day, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I'm usually out there Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. From doing the games on the radio, there is other times where we have access, and although it's not official access, I try not to, I guess, abuse that privilege and do interviews, but I'm always, if I'm riding up in an elevator or hotel with somebody and saying, hey, how's your knee? Not that I would go on and report it, but know the next day that so-and-so maybe had a problem with his knee, and I want to know that,
Right.
So it's weird, you're walking a fine line. I mean, I'm always digging for information, but I also don't want to make the players uncomfortable if they have to be on an elevator with me or something, or on the plane, or, because it is their turf. I mean, I'm respectful of that.
Do you during the off-season all, go and have dinner with any of these guys? Do you have,
Players? No, I mean, they're young guys now. I mean, I'm an older guy. Yeah. There are many guys out there who I like. And years ago, I guess I was closer to guys because they were more my age, Taskers, Steve Tasker, Kelso. I mean, there were great people. I mean, we weren't buddy-buddy. Alex Van Pelt and I always got along. But it's another thing. I don't want to invade their turf. Plus, 25-year-old guys, they don't want to hang out with a guy my age, You know what I mean? They don't. I'm older.
Van, when I interviewed Van, similar stories about
Yeah.
the good old days, when you used to hang.
Yeah. Those are different days, too,
Yeah,
I think, Yeah, I've heard those stories.
Yeah.
I guess, you know what, if I go back far enough, for instance, Shane Conlon, who I know is from this area,
Right.
he and I did a radio show together, and we got to be, fairly good buddies. We wouldn't hang out a lot, but I would play golf with him once in a while. Ray Bentley, who was a good friend of his, we would play golf and maybe drink a few beers, but, if that happened once or twice a year, that was a lot,
Who were those couple of guys that were really good interviews, insightful, who really had a handle on the game?
Yeah, Mark Kelso was one, which is why he's good at what he does now on the radio broadcast. Tasker was good. They had a safety, Henry Jones, who I always thought was smart and insightful. Van Pelt, even when Alex would go weeks, if not months, and never play, but he knew what he was watching and he knew what was going on, and that's why I always like to go to Van Pelt. Kent Hull was tremendous as far as insight, and he sort of opened up the emotional side of what was going on many times, There was a lot of good ones, a lot of good guys.
What about those ones you just couldn't believe? When you sat there with their interview and say, my God, who am I talking with,
Yeah, one of them's going in the Hall of Fame this summer. But Bruce, I think, has grown up a lot. But he was, he's kind of full of himself. And I don't think I would have to say I was never close with him. And even though you had to interview him because he was a spectacular player and a gifted athlete, it was just hard sometimes to get by his ego to get to the truth of the matter,
What about during that time period, the golden era, in fact, you had a little bit of a break there, didn't you?
Yeah, I did not do the 4 Super Bowl
Yeah.
years. I didn't do the games on the radio. 90, 91, 92, and 93.
Was that?
Well, the radio rights switched from WBEN to WGR,
That's
and
right.
they had their own people. They wanted to use their own people. And I was still employed by WBEN, so I couldn't really jump from one radio
Right.
to the other.
Yeah. So you came in 94?
Back on the broadcast in '94.
94. You saw, obviously, the players were still there, but their careers were starting to wind up.
Yeah.
Was that difficult to watch? I mean, you certainly being a huge fan of the Bills, knowing the golden era, and then to see guys being cut. And
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was difficult to watch the end of Kelly's career, and the way I always have that image in my head in the playoff game against Jacksonville when he suffered a concussion and got carted off the field. I mean, that was the last image of Jim Kelly playing for the Buffalo Bills. That was tough to watch. One difficult day was, it had to be, I think it was February something 2000, when they cut Bruce Smith, Thurman Thomas, and Andre Reed the same day. I mean, two of them are in the Hall of Fame. The other one probably will be. That's unprecedented in the NFL.
Right.
A team releasing 3 Hall of Famers the same day, and you could see it coming, and I knew it was coming. But it was a difficult day, and it was difficult. And Bruce went on to have more production. Neither Andre nor Thurman had a whole lot left in the tank. But in an earlier era, there's no way those guys would have finished their careers elsewhere. That was a difficult day and I know it wore heavily on John Butler, who was a general manager at the time. I mean, who cuts 3 potential Hall of Famers in one day? But that was the era of the hard salary cap, and they just couldn't find a way to keep all 3 of them.
John left shortly thereafter, didn't he?
John left. Well, that was 2000. John left it the next year. Yeah. And went to San Diego, right? 01. Yeah. Yeah. He lost. I guess he quit in December of 2000.
The miracle of Music City.
Yeah.
Would you ready to jump out the booth?
Yeah. I don't like the way I've heard tapes of our broadcast, and I would have done that differently. I didn't like the way I reacted to it. I think I got too emotional about it. The referee was awful, and he still works games. He's not a referee anymore. Phil Luckett, he's a line judge or something. He's terrible. And he was in the throes of having a very rough couple of years. He botched a coin flip in a game in Detroit, same guy. So I think that kind of weighed into the way I was thinking about the end of that game. I do believe there was an illegal forward pass still, but, it'll never be proven, obviously. That game, I mean, that team was really good. I mean, and that was still had Bruce Smith and Thurman Thomas and Andre Reed. That was their last game with the Bills, right? It had to be, 99 season, yeah. That team was probably poised to make one more run at the Super Bowl that year. And that one play changed the fortunes of a million things, including those 3 players that I talked about, including, John Butler. He was out after the next season. Rob Johnson, I mean, it changed his perception. I mean, he led the team, he made the start, controversial play because they bypassed Flutie to put Rob Johnson in, led the team downfield, put him in position for what should have been the game-winning field goal. I mean, that was brutal. Yeah. Changed the fortune of a guy who was a pretty good friend of mine, Bruce DeHaven, the special teams coach, That game changed a lot of NFL futures. That play changed a lot of NFL futures. Yeah, that was unforgettable, I mean, in a negative way. And as far as our broadcast, I wish I would have reacted differently to it. I kind of got too emotional, I think.
I forget now. I mean,
I don't remember what I said, but I know I've heard it, and I thought, yeah. Van played into that, too, because Van was pretty emotional. I don't know. I just think I should have been more, I should have been a little bit less emotional.
How do you deal with that whole issue? I mean, you're a fan. I mean,
Yeah.
I realize you're a professional, and you've got to try to be objective, and they tell you to be objective. But the reality is, you've lived all your life in Buffalo,
Yeah.
and you're a Bills fan, and
Yeah.
it's got to be hard.
You know what? I find myself doing a lot lately, like 10 or 15 years now, I was rooting for Bills fans more than anything. I want the fans to be rewarded and want them to be happy. And I see the incredible loyalty of selling out last season and the way people live and die with that team. And it kills me when the fans are not rewarded or aren't, happy.
Right.
And that's what I really root for. So that's the hard part. It's when I see fans who are unhappy about the way things went or don't like the way a particular game ended. I find myself rooting for the fans more than the team, I think, sometimes.
Is there a couple of highlights?
A
couple of calls where you just said, "My God, was I good?"
Yeah, I do that on a weekly basis. No, I mean, was I good? Or
Yeah.
I worry, was that any good?
Yeah.
I mean, I listen to the tapes usually after every week. Sometimes it takes a week or two to get the discs, and I do a lot of self-critiquing, I worry, did that come out right? I mean, when we're doing the games, I think of the people in cars. I mean, a lot of people will listen to games while they watch on TV, or I know people out of town who people will listen to our games while they watch, the satellite feed or something. And that's good, and you want to be good for them, but I really think of the people who need me to tell them what's going on, driving in a car somewhere. And I want to be good. I mean, on those games, I want to have the basics down and distance. Make sure you're not saying what's the score. Make sure you're not saying where's the ball. You want to make sure people have a picture of the game. So that I listen to those games and ask myself, was that any good? Not, boy, I was good. It's more like, geez, was that any good?
Yeah. Does Van critique you?
Yeah, once in a while. It's always positive, good critique. He has something to say. He's very encouraging. Yeah.
Does he ever come in the booth?
Yeah. He when he gets mad, he does. Not at the broadcast. It's what's going on, with the Bills.
He'll just take a walk.
Yeah, he'll walk. He's at every home game, so he'll come down and. At halftime, he'll say, "Can you believe they did that? Or how can they make that call? Or what's the official scene?" Yeah, he still gets pretty excited. Yeah.
Who's your role model?
In broadcasting, Van, obviously.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great broadcasters. Van is one of them, obviously, and I don't know. I guess he's a role model, but I hear a lot of guys that do great work. There's a lot of baseball announcers I love. Ernie Harwell, I guess. I've always admired his work in Detroit. And, one of the great things about satellite radio, I don't know if you guys have satellite radio, you get to hear broadcasts from all over America, and football broadcasts, and I hear a lot of good broadcasts sometimes, and I steal good ideas, Hey, that sounds pretty good. Not lines or phrases, but that's a good idea to do that there instead of here, that sort of thing.
Does the NFL have any critiquing mechanisms for the people who are projecting their product?
No, they don't. I think they pay more attention to the TV network people than they do us. No. I guess I would have heard something if they weren't happy. I would have heard something from them. I know some of those people in New York. But.
You did a great job this summer interviewing Roger Goodell.
Oh,
what
that
did
was
you have
fun.
to do to prep for that?
Well, I've known Roger for a long time, 20 or more years, and so and I knew about his background, and so that helps. And I was comfortable with him. I wasn't in awe of Roger, But for a week or two before, I sort of boned up on what the issues might be, and even though we did the interview here at Chautauqua, and there are Bills fans who were there, obviously I couldn't just focus solely on the Bills. So, we talked a lot about. If you were there, I don't know if you heard it. We talked a lot about player behavior issues and sort of. I'd like to do it again, and I told him that, and I told the Chautauqua people, because one big issue that's come up since then is obviously the economic distress and how it impacts the league. So that wasn't even on our radar back in June of last year, June 28th. Who knew things are going to fall apart in mid-September?
Well, then you did focus in on the value of the first-round draft pick, the person who was signed before the pick, Roger's reaction to it. That got a lot of national press.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and Jake Long, the Dolphins guy, yeah. And he got into the rookie weight scale. He thought that would be a good idea. I love what Roger's done. And I was thinking coming out here today about how, with the news from the Bills about their running back Marshawn Lynch, that that day and subsequently at training camp when Goodell was there, he made a point of saying, we're interested in repeat offenders. And I thought to myself, that's what he's waiting for. And Marshawn Lynch now, he's got a repeat offender of obviously different, criminal things. But I'll be very curious to see what he does with that once everything sorts out, from a fact basis, what actually went on out there.
From your perspective, what was it like being in Toronto?
I can see why the Bills are there, and I can see why it would work. The game itself was brutal. The Bills were awful that day. The performance was abysmal. So they never gave the Bills fans in that crowd a chance to cheer for anything. I read some reports that said there were more Dolphins fans than Bills fans. I don't think that was the case at all, but the Bills scored 3 points. They were brutal that day. I think, given a better performance on the field, we get a more accurate representation of what that crowd will be like. That being said, and I think they acknowledge this, and the people in Toronto, the organizers, realize they had a problem with the way the tickets were priced, and they have to redo that. And I think they will for this the game coming up this year. But it was a financial success for the Bills. It was which is important. I think it was a good first step towards bringing that huge region into the Bills' fold. I mean, if you think about it, that's the 5th largest market in North America, and the NFL owners have ceded that to the Buffalo Bills without an expansion fee, without any sort of fee being paid. They've handed over to the Buffalo Bills the 5th largest market in North America, not to move the entire operation there, but nobody can move a franchise into Toronto now because that's Bills territory. That's significant. That's important. And I think it'd be foolish for the Bills to ignore that, the proximity and the fact that there are NFL football fans in Toronto. But they need to, that's a great thing about pro football and pro sports. You need to perform on the field for anything to work. I mean, you can have the best marketing people in the world, and if you don't perform on the field, then it really doesn't fire. It doesn't work.
Life after Ralph. What's it going to look like?
I don't know. I'm as curious as anyone. I know there are people in Buffalo who are very interested in keeping the franchise there. I am very interested in how the current economic climate plays into, the prospects of moving any team, let alone the Buffalo Bills. I mean, who can afford an NFL team now? Who can afford to take on the kind of debt it would take to, to spend $800 or $900 million or maybe $1 billion to buy a franchise, let alone build a stadium where you got to go. So all these things are sort of in play. I'm feeling better because of the Toronto initiative, and obviously it's just the first step last year. I'm feeling better about the Bills' future in Buffalo than I have in maybe the last 10 or 12 years. I just think it's an important part of the picture to have Toronto fully involved, to play a game there, or at least one, maybe one plus preseason, every other year like they're doing now. It's a 5-year deal. We'll see where it goes after that. But I do think I feel better about the Bills' future in Buffalo now than I have in maybe 10 years or so. I don't know what happens after Mr. Wilson leaves the scene. I don't know.
If you had to complete this question, funniest thing that happened to John Murphy as a broadcaster was, what would you say?
Well, I've already told you the pants story, which my friends always tell. That might be the one. Yeah, I'd go with the ripped pants, especially my wife's reaction and riding on the back of the motorcycle with. I wish I had video of that. I would like to have seen that.
Did you find, is there still a 7-second delay, or the button that where there's the kind of the comment that went astray when you and Van are talking, and all of a sudden you say some expletive and they forgot to delete it?
I've never said that. I've said damn it on the air. You got some notice for that. But there was a Bills game 2 years ago where it bothers me. I hear in certain quarters in Buffalo media, radio sports talk shows, they like to think the Bills are irrelevant. And all I know is every one of those Bills games last year, 16 Bills games, there are going to be 16 of the top 20 rated TV shows on TV in Buffalo last year. So, you sell out the season with 73,000 seats, every game, and you have the highest rated TV shows and incredible radio ratings every week. I don't know how anybody can refer to it as irrelevant. And what brings that to mind is there was a game against the Dolphins 2 seasons ago where the week leading up to it, talk show people were talking about the Bills are irrelevant, nobody cares anymore. And I'm looking out at a full stadium in a game that went down to the wire that the Bills won, and don't tell me it's not relevant. Of course it's relevant. And I said something like, if you weren't here, damn it, you should have been. And I really believe that. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about there's nothing like the spectacle of an NFL Sunday. There's nothing like it. You can listen to it on the radio or see it on TV, but you have to be there to feel what it feels like. And I think it's unmatched in American culture, let alone American sports.
Big football fans. I mean, I read an Alan Pergament column. He was talking about the draw for the Pro Bowl.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's crazy.
It was like 13 points, whatever it
Yeah.
was. It was just a crazy draw. Viewing audience in the Buffalo area for the Pro Bowl.
Yeah, incredible numbers.
Yeah.
I love the Sabres. I'm a big hockey fan, and the Sabres do pretty well. I mean, they get incredible ratings for hockey, but the highest rated Sabres playoff game on TV is almost as much as the lowest rated Bills regular season game, TV ratings wise. There's no comparison. I mean, there's nothing like it on TV in Buffalo. There's Bills football. There's nothing that draws those kind of numbers.
If you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
I don't know. I've thought about that.
Thing, leaving law
Yeah, I don't think I'd be practicing law. I don't know. Probably be Public Works in the town of Orchard Park or something. Have some sort of cushy job. I don't know. I mean, I went through a hiatus about a year ago, 6-month hiatus when I switched TV stations And I actually looked around at other things, and I could have done some other things, but realized it's not what I wanted to do. So
Yeah. Well, it's been, the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame is just thrilled that you're coming down here. They wanted to try to get
I know.
you, book you in for a long time.
I know it's always February. Now, usually the rating periods are in February. I could never get off in February, but now the rating period is in March.
Yeah.
So
But yeah,
that's why this worked out.
they're thrilled. that you're
Yeah,
coming down.
I'm excited.
Great. Well, thank you. You're gonna.